or watching on Portland Community Media. Today, our panelists will discuss how Oregon can become an international wine and culinary destination. But first, some announcements. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners ensures we put on the state's best civic programs week after week. I'd like to thank our media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine, and our current Friday Forum corporate sponsors, Morel Inc., Northwest Natural, and Schwabe Williamson and Wyatt. We are grateful for your support and commitment to City Club's mission. Please join me in a warm round of applause for all of them. We will not hold any Friday Forums in August, so enjoy the rest of the summer, and we'll see you back here on Friday, September 6th. In the meantime, you can learn more about club events, purchase tickets, and become a member at our website, pdxcityclub.org. As always, City Club will be live tweeting this event. You can follow along and join the conversation using the hashtag CityClub in your own tweets. We'll be having a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's program. Members, please come to the microphone to ask your questions. And for all our audience participants, please locate the index cards on the center of your tables and write your questions on them during the forum. We'll collect them prior to the start of the Q&A. And now to our program. In the beginning, Oregon's wine pioneers focused on learning how to grow wine grapes and make wine. They devoted themselves to improving their farming and winemaking practices, incorporating a lot of sustainability practices to make world-class wines that earned a loyal following and international recognition. Today, Oregon boasts nearly 500 wineries around the state, contributing more than $1.5 billion to our state's economy. To help us explore how this came to be and the potential future, we are joined today by 4 of Oregon's wine and cultural leaders. Steve Hurst is a hospitality professional with over 20 years of experience ranging from hotel and restaurant operations to sales and marketing. He began his career with the Sports Club LA and continued with leadership roles with Pebble Beach Resorts. He currently is the assistant general manager at the Allison Inn Spa in Newberg, Oregon. As Vice President of Global Brand Strategy for Travel Oregon, Holly McPhee oversees driving a positive brand image for the state and ensuring creative excellence across all communications. Travel Oregon's marketing programs, including its culinary-focused Oregon Bounty campaign, have been recognized nationally by the U.S. Travel Association as the best overall marketing campaign in the country. Allison Sokol-Blosser, daughter of Susan Sokol-Blosser and Bill Blosser, remembers being small enough to climb into the press to help her father clean it during harvest. After working with consumer brand giants such as Nike and Nordstrom, she came home to Sokol-Blosser. As co-president, she plans the strategic future of the business. Also, Sokol-Blosser Winery donated the wine for today's program. Thank you very much. Moderating today's forum is Karen Hinsdale. Karen turned her passion for wine into a unique retail wine buying experience called the Cellar Door. As co-owner of premium wine distributor Henny Hinsdale, she had the opportunity to develop strong personal relationships with great wine producers from all over the world. Please help me welcome them to the stage.
So, welcome all to the City Club of Portland's conversation about the Oregon wine country and the continuing transformation into a wine country destination. I was part of the first City Club panel discussion about the Oregon wine industry back in 2002. It was wonderful here to return today to revisit the incredible impact that this industry and all those grapes out there have had on the Oregon economy. Definitely not wanting this to be a dry conversation, we want to thank again Allison Sokol-Blosser for the lovely Sokol-Blosser Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris that our members are enjoying here today with their lunch. We hope our radio listeners will pull the cork on their favorite Oregon wine to savor during our conversation. My history with this industry began back in the 70s when, upon turning to Oregon with a freshly minted degree, after a stint with my then husband at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where we were introduced to many military individuals who were returning from their deployments in Europe. These were wine enthusiasts who were returning to share their wine, and they abounded with many cases of wine to share with us. Further, with a ready access to the vibrant retail wine market in Georgetown, which abounded with many wine apostles, well, after all that time and all that wonderful wine, we were hooked. We returned to Oregon and began taking wine classes from a family friend named John Henney. At that time, Mr. Henney was known as Mr. Fine Wine Ambassador. And before we knew it, we were offering to buy his tiny wine distribution company. He said yes, Henney Hinsdale was created, and wow, we were in the wine business. It was a very exciting time for the wine business in general, and especially for the Oregon industry. And we, like many of our contemporaries at that time, we didn't know a thing about wine distribution. We didn't know any more about it than they did about making wine. So it was a wonderful ride together. I can count on both hands the founders, incredible people, inspired by a dream with youthful enthusiasm, exuberance, and tenacity. There were names like Irie, Adelsheim, Erath, Ponzi, and Sokol-Blosser. The holy grail was Pinot Noir. They were dedicated to planting it, growing it, and making a world-class wine. They created their dreams out of whole cloth. There were no professors here with knowledge to share. There were no clones that were selected specifically for our climate or growing conditions. Of the few who had studied winemaking at the Hollow UC David, they found that they came back to Oregon and had to unlearn so much of what they'd been taught to establish Pinot Noir here in Oregon. Underfunded, overworked, and universally underappreciated, these early adapters hung together, shared most everything they had, and continued to believe. So if you put it into perspective, you only make wine once a year. So a veteran winemaker may have only made wine 20 or 30 times in their entire career. And every year, Mother Nature pitches you a different curve, presenting you with a completely different set of circumstances. It's a very, very steep learning curve. And so much Malcolm Gladwell for those 10,000 hours. It was my privilege to know these people personally, to have witnessed their struggles, kicked the dirt clods in their early vineyards, and tasted their early efforts. And in many cases, we were privileged to distribute their wines. To say that you've come a long way, baby, is a real understatement when you reflect on these last 4 decades. In 1970, there were just 5 bonded wineries in Oregon, and 35 grape acres were recorded. By 1980, there were 34 wineries and 1,100 acres. We will learn more from our panelists today about the growth of the wine industry in Oregon as we talk about one of the most exciting aspects of our vital generic wine industry, its impact on culinary tourism. So let me first start with you, Allison. Tell us about your parents coming to Oregon. How did they get started here? And as a second generation, what does the wine industry look like today?
Well, it's pretty amazing to think that in 1970 we had 5 wineries, and now 4 decades later we have nearly 500. It's pretty impressive. And normally, I'm asked that question a lot of why did your parents do this and how did they do this? And normally I would say, well, they were absolutely crazy. But however, my mother's in the audience today, so I didn't say that. And no, so my mom and dad were not unlike the many other families that Karen mentioned. They came to Oregon. They came in their Volkswagen camper bus. They had no farming background, no winemaking background, no business background. They were history majors, and they thought, "Hey, we love wine. Yes, let's make history." They loved wine. They did not set out to make history. I think if they knew what they were getting into, they wouldn't have done it. Yeah. But they loved wine. People have been making wine forever. Can't be that hard. So they decided to give it a try. And they were teachers by day. Luckily, they had a real job, day job. It's very important. And they drove around looking for the perfect piece of property, and they found an old 5-acre prune orchard. And the theory was that if it had been successful as orchards, it could be a great place to grow wine grapes. And luckily, that worked. And now we have about 120 acres, and there's 500 wineries in Oregon, and the actual economic impact of the wine industry is about $2.7 billion, which is amazing. And we directly contribute 14,000 jobs. So for an industry that didn't exist 40 years ago, to contribute that many jobs to the state is amazing. The majority of the vineyards and the wineries are in the Willamette Valley. So about 80% of the vineyards are in the Willamette Valley. But don't forget about Southern Oregon and the Columbia Gorge, which are also really exciting up-and-coming wine-growing areas. The average Oregon winery is producing less than 6,000 cases, which, that's more than I can drink, especially right now. But, putting that into perspective, the average California winery is producing over 55,000 cases. So Oregon is a collection of very small, artisan, handcrafted winemakers who are very committed to producing the best quality product.
So Allison, what do you think is next for the industry?
Well, in the beginning, it was focusing on where do you, what's the best site? How do you make wine? How do you, grow the grapes? And I'm not saying that we figured all that out, but, we're able to consistently make pretty good quality wine every year. Then the next thing was marketing and sales and traveling around the country, traveling around the world with the map. Here's California, here's Oregon, and teaching people how to pronounce Willamette. It rhymes with damn it. So, sorry, you can edit that out on the radio. But that was very important to teach people and educate them about the quality of Oregon wine. And now that we're there and we've got the amazing international recognition, and Oregon Pinots are routinely on the cover of Wine Spectator, and Decanter Magazine, another great international wine publication, is often including Oregon wines. The next frontier, I really believe, is wine tourism, and how do we make Oregon that sought after, internationally renowned wine country destination that people, it's like, okay, they go to Napa every year, they go to South Africa, they're going to France, they're going to Italy. They need to come to Oregon. And what do we need to do to evolve our hospitality practices here to create the best environment for that?
Very exciting. So, Holly, now we've heard about the growth of the Oregon wine industry, and we've heard this word culinary tourism. So tell us about the growth of this tourism niche.
Sure, thanks, Karen. I loved your stories. You two should collaborate on a book. It's absolutely true that one of the primary drivers of Oregon's positive image as a culinary destination over the past decade in particular is attributed to this growth you're talking about in wineries, but not just wineries, the whole food and drink scene in Oregon in general. It's really a convergence of several factors that happened about a decade ago. The first is this, explosion of wineries, breweries, the influx of artisan producers, the chefs who were drawn here by the veritable bounty that we enjoy in Oregon. So there was that happening, and the emergence of the local food market, the local food movement. And then at the same time, Oregon passed a 1% statewide lodging tax, which finally gave us a stable source of funding to actually market and compete on the competitive landscape in terms of marketing Oregon as a tourism destination. And then on top of that, at the same time, there was a national study that was done by the U.S. Travel Association that showed that culinary tourism was this rapidly rising niche market of opportunity in the country. And there were 27 million culinary travelers that were identified, and Oregon was high on their radar as a desirable wine destination. So it was this magical confluence of factors that led Travel Oregon back in 2004 to create Oregon Bounty, which is our culinary marketing program. And over the past 9 years, Travel Oregon spent a little over $15 million marketing wine touring and culinary tourism. And that may seem like a big number, but when you add to that the private sector investment by the hospitality industry, like the Allison, the wineries, like Sokol Blosser, all the destination marketing organizations across the state, the national media attention. It's just been a wonderful opportunity and period of growth for us. And even despite the recession, we know it's working. So for context, over the past 5 years, We have enjoyed an average 20% increase in our response rates to our advertising campaigns, even during the recession, and specifically to our Oregon Bounty campaigns. So we're really excited about continuing to grow this market.
So you talk about the Oregon wine country experience. So tell us a little more about that, Holly. What exactly is your message to this culinary tourist?
Well, I have to say, hearing Allison's story and your story, Karen, and hearing so many vintners speak of this spirit and drive and kind of rugged nature that drew them here, and the risk-taking, we try to reflect all of that spirit in our marketing. Truly, what we're trying to do is reflect the true experience of traveling here in wine country, right? Because no brand is successful if it isn't authentic and honest. So we talk about Oregon as being that unmatched place where it's still possible to go to a winery and meet a winemaker, interact with them on a personal level, that pioneering spirit. And there's a sense of, there's a lack of pretension about our wine experience here that's very attractive to visitors. It's uncrowded, it's serene and relaxing and intimate, and that's very appealing as well, especially when you think of our competitive set, so the Napa Valley experience, for example. And so there's that whole messaging, if you will, around the people that you meet, and then there's the product, which is heralded internationally as such a true expression of place, right? Our wines are recognized around the world for that honesty. I've heard, winemakers say, it's just, Oregon in a glass. It's such an honest expression of the landscape here. And then on top of that, so the people and the product, there's the experience of touring here, right? So you referred to the Columbia River Gorge. Where else in the world can you visit wineries that are set in the middle of a national scenic area, right? And then you head over to the valley and you're going down mist-covered hills with a view of Mount Hood in the distance, and their neighbors are berry farmers and hazelnut farmers and creameries and incredible chefs. And then you go down to southern Oregon, and the wineries are nestled beside wild rivers, right? And they're adjacent to Crater Lake and the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. It's just really an unparalleled experience.
So we've talked a little bit about the experience. So what exactly does this Oregon culinary tourist look like? Who are we targeting with this message?
Sure. We are targeting, well, we look at our target audience in a couple different ways. One is quantitatively, and another way is through a mindset approach, if you will. So we feel that this mass market consumer world is yielding to one where people are really valuing connections and experiences over acquiring the next new thing. So you see this emergence of the culinary, the cultural tourist, the eco-tourist. It's all connected to that, that yearning for experience. And so we call our travelers experience-hungry travelers or explorers. And we think they're actually like Oregonians, right? They value what they've seen and what they've done more than what they own. And so that is a really a great audience for us to go after. So that's the mindset. And then quantitatively, if you just want to kind of break down the numbers, where do they come from? And predominantly from the West Coast. They are, but also around the world, and I'll talk about those numbers a little bit later. They are affluent, so medium income, $100,000 a year. A broad range of 25 to 64, but that sweet spot is in the early 40s of our wine. Excuse me?
Those wine collecting years.
Yeah, those wine collecting years. And, these folks are tech enthusiasts. They are huge users of mobile and tablets, which is great for us to be able to market to them in their social circles. And they are very influential, too. You can actually target people by their influence circles. So these are people who their friends listen to for wine recommendations and travel recommendations and cooking tips, because they're avid home cooks and they buy high-quality wine.
We like that they buy high-quality wine. So Steve, let me turn to you. Tell us a little bit about the Allison Inn and Spa, kind of profile of your visitors and how you've responded to this culinary tourism opportunity.
Sure, of course. We have a unique situation where, much like Susan Sokol-Blosser, Joanne Austin and the Austin family took a bit of a chance and pioneered a new resort into a community that didn't have that. They certainly had hospitality and some terrific bed and breakfast restaurants, but to invest at the level that she did towards a large-scale resort, although when I say large-scale, we are just 85 rooms. We're not a large-scale resort by any means, but it's a large facility and new to the region for sure. Obviously, the investment side was significant. If anybody's been to the Allison, it's a beautiful property. But more than that, it was investment into the community and the future of the community. They really saw this pioneering effort by the wineries and what they have accomplished as something that needed to take a next step. And I think she was a visionary towards doing so and really successfully brought that to a worldwide stage.
Tell us a little bit more about the profile of the visitor who comes to the Allison.
Well, I think Holly spoke a little bit of the type of guests that we see. We see a pretty wide spectrum of guests, ranging from young professionals in their 20s to retirees traveling. I don't think there's a direct demographic I can speak to. It's this product appeals to a very wide range of people.
So Allison, let's flip back to the winery side and talk a little bit about how the Oregon wine industry is responding directly to this new cultural tourist.
Well, we can't understate the importance of having the Allison with us in Newburgh, that we for such a long time did not have any luxury destination resort out in wine country. There were some amazing bed and breakfasts, and then everyone else needed to stay in Portland pretty much. So having the Allison out is huge. You know, what's next for Oregon wine country tourism is that it's a huge collaboration, that it's not just the wineries, it's also having the lodging component, the restaurants, the spas, the arts, the other activities, and it's really a win-win-win. Obviously, selling direct to consumers for wineries is the most profitable way to sell our product, but there's also the spillover into the other industries, and then there's also, you know, ultimately building brand Oregon, which is incredibly important for all of us. For the wine and culinary tourist, it's not a one-size-fits-all. They really want depth and breadth of experiences, depth and breadth of wines. They may be attracted to Oregon for our Pinot Noir. That's what we're best known for. However, once they're here, they want to try everything else. The weirder, the better. So Chardonnay, Tempranillo, Gruner Veltliner, Müller-Thurgau, whatever we have, they're very interested in trying that. And so, you know, when you look around at what all the different wineries are offering, you know, you've got the farm-to-table dinners that Phelps Creek is offering out in the Columbia Gorge in their vineyard. You've got the restaurant that King Estate has on their property outside of Eugene. And then locally, we've had a bunch of new facilities open. Ponzi just opened their new tasting room in June. Willamette Valley Vineyards is getting ready to open their new facility in the fall. And then at Sokol-Blosser, we just opened a brand new tasting room July 1st as well. And we're really trying to evolve our hospitality offerings to attract this audience, this high-end wine and culinary tourist. And so we're actually offering 5 different experiences so that it can be very tailored to whatever the audience wants. Whether they want a super geeky vertical Pinot Noir flight and get just totally geeked out, technical, sit down, very educational, we can do that. If they want a cheese and wine pairing, they can do that. If they want a tableside service, which is a little bit more like being at a wine bar, but sitting out on the terrace and having the flight of wine brought to them, we can offer that. And then, of course, we have our regular tasting flight, just standing at the bar. So, you know, there's a lot of different experiences that we're trying to offer to try to attract this high-end wine and culinary visitor.
Well, I can certainly vouch for the fact that the new Sokol-Blosser facility is beautiful, the one that Bill Stoller has put in. There's some really phenomenal places that you can go out to Oregon wine country, whether it's here in the Willamette Valley or downstate, and really experience some incredible investments that people have made in this. So, Steve, I want to flip back to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about the what in this culinary tourism? What is this culinary traveler coming to Oregon to experience, and how does the Allison really respond to that?
Sure. I actually will respond a little bit to what Allison just said as well. The reason people are coming to the Allison isn't because we built a beautiful facility. They're coming for the wine. They're coming for these enhanced developments that we're seeing, these growth of tasting rooms. Very rarely do we get a phone call from somebody saying, "Ooh, I couldn't wait to get to the Allison," until just recently. That has changed. That has changed. We've been very fortunate to see that change, but the bulk of people who are coming to the Valley are coming to experience what is that reputation, that growing reputation of culinary travel, what that means beyond just wine. It's wine and food and how they pair together. Exploring the various purveyors that fill the valley as well. Next to every winery in general is the hazelnut farms, the berry farms, the various other pieces that you hear, including livestock, everything in between. It's very much a throwback to a very simpler time of developing food and developing wine and how they pair together. So it's great that we have so many people coming to visit for that reason. We've been fortunate, and I'll steal a moment to talk about the accolades for just a moment. We've been very fortunate through that experience, and I think the experience extends beyond just our hotel. But as a result of that whole experience, we've been named the #4 wine country hotel in the world, #1 wine country hotel in the United States, and also the #1 spa. Yeah, thank you.
By Travel and Leisure, right? By Travel and Leisure?
Correct. That was by Travel and Leisure, which is a tremendous moment for us, and we were very proud of that, but we also know where that comes from. It's part of the breadth of experience beyond just our hotel.
Well, you also have some pretty talented people in your kitchen, and I think when the Allisons, when they put in that incredible organic garden out there and really helped to be a flagship, you might want to comment just a little bit about your cuisine and food on property.
Sure. She was speaking of the garden that grew from 3/4 acre to 1.5 acres in the last year, including a 90 by 46 greenhouse. So we'll have annual production in our restaurant, Jory. We also, our executive chef, Sunny Jin, is experienced from El Boulé, French Laundry, amongst others. And we did just hire another chef just in the last few days, who's another chef from French Laundry as well. So the increased demand for culinary creativity. So yes, that's a big news break, because that's not out yet. So I guess it is now. So we definitely have a lot of excitement coming from this, but we needed to expand our culinary breadth with adding another chef with a unique look, and it's really amazing to see what's coming from the garden and that exploration that's coming from it.
Well, I think we've all shared, as we've chatted here, about the history of the culinary experience in Oregon, and it's been great chefs who supported farmers who would be able to produce small quantities of the same types of food that are grown next to our wonderful grapes that have allowed the food side of Oregon to develop in parallel with the wine side. So Holly, I want to flip back to you, and let's talk a little bit about the residual effects. When a tourist comes here, has a great experience in Oregon, is there any residual effect that goes along with having had a great wine country experience?
Yes, definitely. We see impacts both short and long term, and not just in the predominant wine growing regions, but really across the state, because we actually did a recent study that showed us that Oregon's food and drink scene, kind of the unique quality of our food and drink scene, is a destination driver, right? So it's causing people to choose to come to Oregon on a vacation. But beyond that destination driving mechanism, there is a whole realm of influence that happens in product purchase once they return home, and on influencing their friends and family to come to Oregon, because we know word of mouth is so incredibly strong, especially in the travel sector. So just to give you some context, 43% of Oregon visitors said they are more likely to purchase Oregon products upon returning home from their trip, and 55% of Oregon visitors actually did purchase products a few or several times when they returned home. And 42% said that introducing their family and friends to Oregon's local products will greatly influence their decision to take a trip here. So you can see this kind of virtual circle of connection between coming here, buying the products, bringing them home, telling your friends about it. And you know, when you come home from a trip, you can't wait to share it with your friends. You get some wine from the place, you either bring it home from the place or you buy it locally. Hopefully you have lots of Oregon wine that's distributed where you live, and then you share that experience and you tell them about the people and the place, and then they want to come. That's what happens.
Well, I think what we've discussed here a little bit is about back from the very beginning, the history of our industry. It was a lot of really hardworking people who went out and made it happen and then went out and told the story. I think chatting about this before we came down today, we talked a little bit about the need to get that story told broadly. Lots of travel magazines want to talk about the next cruise or that next trip to Italy. So we're certainly pushing the full, but we just put our full effort behind getting more stories to be published to talk about Oregon, to bring people here and be able to increase the impact that this is having on our entire economy. Is there anything else all of you would like to share, having heard this, that we might have possibly missed here in our conversation? Any of the accolades? We've had some wonderful wines achieve some great achievements in terms of the Wine Spectator. We've been on the cover. There's lots of other things that have expanded the story of Oregon wine country and certainly invited the culinary tourists to come here. So any of you have anything else you'd like to mention here before we move to questions?
You know, one of the things that I thought about as you were talking about how do we get the word out is the incredible growth in the culinary events in Oregon over the past decade. So the amazing IPNC, which is International Pinot Noir Celebration, which is happening this very weekend, right now as we speak. The Oregon Truffle Festival in Eugene is an incredible experience drawing people. Feast Portland came out of this whole growth of the culinary tourism niche. The Yachats Mushroom Festival, if you haven't been, you must go. There are just so many unique culinary events across the state. And the other thing for perspective about, you know, Allison, you were talking about economic impact. So tourism in Oregon overall is a $9 billion industry, 90,000 jobs. And I think that people aren't often aware that the volume of people who are coming here. So last year, for example, in the past 12 months, we had over 9 million visitors, and 55% of those people participated in a culinary experience. And that's not just they checked the box that said, I went to a restaurant.
I ate in Oregon.
Right? It's, I went to a winery, I went to a brewery, I sought out a unique artisan purveyor. It's that kind of experience. And, you know, 1.5 million of them said that visiting wineries was the motivator for their visit. So the opportunity here is just immense, and you know, we're excited to tap into it.
Steve?
I would also like to add a few things about availability of wineries and how that's grown. The wineries and the tasting rooms have become increasingly available, and more we're seeing these wineries that are open year-round, 7 days a week, or at least 5 to 6 days a week. There's certainly a lot of demand for that, and I can tell you from the guests visiting the Allison, they're all going out in the valley, they're all experiencing these wineries, and they're all buying wine. We see a lot of cases return, and we do a lot of shipping of those cases. So it's been very successful as a result. And the more of those we can get, the better. It's certainly fantastic to have that. And I will also say that while we're in Oregon and it does rain sometimes, I've heard, if you look outside, it's not showing. But even when those soft times come, a little plug for the Allison, we do have the #1 spa in America as well. So when it is raining, even Karen has talked to the details of sitting by the windows in the room and relaxing and enjoying what it is, the Allison and the wine in the region, and utilizing that spa. That's really so beautiful down there.
Well, I think we can also be very grateful for all of the other hospitality and hotels around the state who really supported this. Back in the day before the Allison, the wonderful bed and breakfasts we had, but we had great hotels in downtown Portland who really committed themselves to providing the same kind of concierge service that you at the Allison provide for the customer who wants to come here, needs a little guidance and direction. Once they get out there in wine country, we know they're going to have a great experience, and they're going to go home and tell all their friends. So they're all going to come back to Oregon and share another great Oregon experience. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up unless you want anything, Allison, you want to share at the end?
The only thing I'll mention is that there were some free tasting passes that were being circulated. So hopefully you'll want to come out and for yourself see firsthand, if you've not already, what Oregon wine country looks like, and come visit Sokoblasser.
And the beautiful Sokoblasser tasting room, which is stunning. So with that, I think you would all agree that we're very passionate about the Oregon industry up here, and that we really believe very strongly in what economic impact it has had on our state and certainly our community and all the people who have supported this industry through their work and their efforts. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm going to read what is the regular City Club response to the end. So as we will invite all of the members of the City Club to the microphone to ask their questions. Asking questions at Friday Forum is a privilege of a benefit of being a City Club member, and membership is open to everyone. Before you ask your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. There's a fellow over here who will be waving his hand at you if you are taking too long. Also, I will read audience members' questions that will be written on index cards, and if you have a question, please raise your hand so that City Club staff can come by and pick it up. And we are now open for questions, so I'm hoping we have some good ones.
Johnson, City Club member. Thank you so much for coming. I've had some experience when picking berries as a kid, serving wine with family friends at wine festivals on the coast in the 80s. I've not observed it as closely as you have, but I have some awareness of the change in the industry. One of the things that having had a chance to visit some of the older wine country kind of settings like Napa Valley and South Africa, the Stellenbosch area a couple of years ago, they offer some transportation options that you haven't touched on yet, so that when you land in one of those places and you've come quite a distance, there is a way to hook up pretty easily with somebody that will give you some range of access and experience that I don't think has been available in Portland or in the Valley until recently. Somebody had to be the designated driver, and that was the only way you got there. Has that changed in recent years?
I can speak to the growth of that industry. When we first opened the Allison approaching 4 years ago, it was near impossible to get a taxi to get out there. So it is growing rapidly. I think we have 14 companies that we service from now at the Allison. It still is a growing need for sure, and there's needs to be some development in that area. But businesses come when there's need, and they are coming. So we see more and more of that each year, and I imagine that's going to continue to grow.
And there's also alternative transportation options as well. There's biking tours that are being offered. I dream that there'll be hiking paths between connecting vineyards and so forth. So I've heard that that's also in the works in the Carleton area. So there's also some alternative options that are being explored.
Jeannie Crouch, City Club member. You've all talked about the wonderful and interesting growth of the industry in the last many years. And since this is a City Club event, I have to ask kind of a wonkish question. From a policy perspective, do you feel like the state is doing what it needs to do to support the industry and the attendant tourism so that we can continue that growth and bring those dollars into the state? And relatedly, are there things that, in addition to supporting the industry growth, are there things that we should be doing to benefit even more as a state from those tourism dollars?
Well, I think one of the most important things that the state has done, and this is from the very beginning, is through the land use laws, helping to protect the hillsides to remain farmland. Because without that, the hillsides wouldn't be vineyards. They would be home sites and so forth. So that's probably the most important thing that the state has done. We also have, in the Oregon wine industry, a self-imposed tax that helps to fund research and marketing for the Oregon wine industry through the Oregon Wine Board. In terms of tourism, Holly mentioned the 1% lodging tax, and I think even looking at the Oregon Wine Board's budget compared to similar board-size budgets from Washington and California, we're quite small, and that's really just a reflection that we're a collection of small vineyards, small wineries, and we only have so much. There are some new entrants into the industry. You've probably heard about Kendall Jackson purchasing quite a big piece of property, and Precept Brands coming in and purchasing quite a bit of property. So those are definitely more opportunities for the industry to gain more money to help market itself even better nationally and internationally.
So Holly, do you want to comment a little bit on the state from your perspective, what Travel Oregon has been able to do and with the bounty, and what else you think? Obviously you have a dream too.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things, I echo Allison's comments about, you know, we need to continue to have a balanced approach to our policy and land use, because it's that very policy that has protected the character of the place and that is creating this experience that visitors want to come live for a long weekend or a week. But there's also incredible opportunity in our international markets, and we haven't really talked about that. So despite the downturn in the economy over the past years, we've been seeing big growth in the global markets. 13% increase in international visitors 2012 over 2011, and I'm sure, Steve, you can speak to this as well. And China alone was up 45% last year. It's gone from the number 10 market for Oregon visitors, for international visitors to Oregon, to the number 4th market in the past 4 years. And now our wines are distributed in China, and those, because of the global kind of accolades for our incredible product and the experience here, it's a driver for international visitors, and they really want to come here and experience the wine country firsthand, especially in Asia, in Japan and China. Maybe you can speak to the growth of the global market.
Absent some the numbers necessarily, but we have had significant growth in international travel. Travelers are coming from all over the United States, of course, and we're seeing growth in all those markets as well. But the international traveler definitely is attending. I do also want to go back to Allison's statement. Joanne Austin very much believed in not encroaching on the farms and the vineyards, and the Allison Inn Spa is built within city limits of Newburgh.
And just to that point, I would add that it was it was the wine shipments bill that I think will probably go down as being one of the really most beneficial things to our early wine industry here. Reciprocity and the ability to ship wine out of state to a state that would accept your wines and not require it be taxed, or that it have to go through the distribution pattern, allowed our small wineries to begin to have a presence in the country that would simply not have been possible. The distribution pattern is very difficult for smaller wineries, and the distribution pattern is shrinking and becoming so dominated by large distributors that it's really, really difficult when you're a 6,000 case winery to get any mind share at all in a very, very large house. And so I think we have to look back to the wine shipments bill, which was a landmark bill, again, one of those things that Oregon did. Bill Nelson back in the day forced it through, we got it through, and we actually got a few states that would allow us to have reciprocity so we could test it. So I think most of my friends in the Oregon wine industry would agree that that has helped them tremendously.
Well, and especially as I look around at a lot of other states, Oregon is so incredibly friendly to the wineries. There's a lot of other states that are so much more difficult for us to try to do business in, to sell wine through their systems and so forth. The reciprocity bill was a big thing.
Yep, you could ship it, you could buy it and send it home, which was a little better than taking one bottle at a time. Back in those days, you could take it on a plane. Now you could never get it out of here.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it made me think of, we actually have a program that's launching in just a few weeks with Alaska Airlines. It's a program in conjunction with Travel Oregon and the Oregon Wine Board. And Oregon wines will fly free on Alaska Airlines when you go to a participating winery. There are, I think, almost 250 wineries signed up to date. You show your boarding pass and you get to ship your wine home for free. And you get a free tasting at the winery. So it's also... it's the distribution chain, it's unique partnerships, it's all of that that helps take advantage of the opportunity.
I'm Jeannie Magmer, and I'm a City Club member, and my concern is the next generation. One of the next generation is up there, but what is the wine industry and the tourism industry doing in the way of apprenticeship training, in the way of cooperation with our schools, our community colleges, to train that next generation to carry this industry forward?
That's an outstanding question, and it's definitely been a need for many years to have people, trained and excited about the industry and hospitality in particular. I would say that Linfield is probably making the biggest strides in that area. And actually, next week, they've been running a summer program focused on the wine industry, and they've got 5 or 6 interns that are in this program, and they're going through and they're meeting every week with different folks from the industry to learn all the different facets of the business. And so they're going to be at Sokol Blosser next week, and I have 4 hours to, I haven't quite figured out what all I'm going to share. Mom, maybe you could go help. But they've developed a program and partnered with the wine industry to make sure that their graduates are coming out and able to join the industry, whether that's in events or winemaking or even accounting. Actually, accounting for the wine industry is so complicated and different because we have the farming, the manufacturing, the distribution, and the retail, that getting folks with that type of experience and that knowledge is really important. So they've been doing a great job. Chemeketa has some wonderful programs for enology and viticulture as well, so they're definitely helping on the production side of things.
There's also the Southern Oregon Wine Institute, right?
Yes.
And
And then OSU.
And then OSU. There's the Cornell School of Hospitality has opened a tourism and hospitality branch in Bend, if you're not aware. And so there's an excellent program over there. Mount Hood Community College has a great tourism program. So there are a lot of opportunities for young professionals coming up into the industry to learn the trade.
You know, I think, and as having been around here since the beginning, and I think Susan would probably speak to this as well, is there's just a tremendous willingness to share. I can't tell you the number of young people that are now making wine that back in the day, while they were working as bartenders or as waiters, told me, I want to get in the wine business. And they were mentored and welcomed by winery after winery. They worked in the winery, they helped make wine, they helped work in the vineyards. They were willing to go out there and put their time and energy into it. I don't think they were turned away by anyone. And I think that same spirit that founded the industry is the same spirit that's nurturing the next generation. It's a welcoming and open environment, and young people from all over the world come here. I think that was what brought Ruin here, was the idea that, gosh, we could just make wine here without all those terrible regulations and have an experience here. That willingness to share, I think, is a really, really unique part of the Oregon wine experience and the Oregon wine industry. So I have a couple questions here that are probably just a little structural. Where can you find out about culinary events in Oregon? So Holly, right, cue right to you.
Oh my gosh, I swear I did not write that question. It's at traveloregon.com. We actually gather events from through the Wine Board, the Brewers Guild, all the destination marketing organizations across the state, and have thousands of events and trip ideas and photo essays and really everything you'd need to plan your trip to Oregon.
So we could start at that place, and I'm sure Allison and both you at the Sokol Blosser have things that you post on your site, and you as well, things, Steve, out at the Allison, so we could check on any of those websites to find out what's happening. So one more question here. Oh, pardon me. We have someone in the audience. Go ahead.
Ted Kay, City Club member. If I understood it correctly, 1.5 million visitors to Oregon are wine or culinary travelers out of 9 million. That's 1/6 of visitors to Oregon. That's astounding to me. Yeah. Question, do you estimate spending by those travelers, per person spending, and how does that compare to the average traveler to Oregon?
I don't have the spending with me for culinary travelers, but I can tell you, broken out, so we know overall spending for visitors in the state, but I can tell you that, and Allison and Steve would echo this, that the culinary traveler is affluent, as we've mentioned, and they're also some of the most active travelers out there, right? So they are spending money on the arts and on spas, they're golfers, and they really are some of the most active travelers. In terms of that niche versus other area activities of interest in Oregon, so if wine lovers, if you will, culinary tourists represents about 10%, I'd say golfers are in the 5 to 10% range, same with cyclists. And remember, there's a big cross-section between all those people too. So you talked about the cycling tours emerging throughout, the state and in wine country and you know, in other places. So that gives you
And
some
there's now
perspective.
the Oregon Wine Country half marathon
Yeah,
too,
that's
so
right.
runners.
That's right.
John Leeper, City Club member. I want to thank you for a very informative presentation here. My question concerns Oregon land use requirements. I wonder if those land use requirements have caused your industry, and particularly the placement of things like wine tasting rooms, have posed any particular problem for you.
Well, the land use laws in Oregon have protected our industry to a great deal because they're ensuring that we have vineyard land protected as vineyard land. And as long as you have, I forget if it's 15 or 20 acres, as long as you have something like that, you can have an on-site winery with a tasting room where you're selling your wines that you've produced. And I think that that's a good, that's a good minimum. So as long as you have, you know, a certain amount of acreage and you're producing wine on site, you're allowed to have a tasting room. And I think that that's been a very good policy. And there's almost 500 wineries now, so there's not too much that hasn't put on too many limitations on being able to open up a tasting room if you are producing your own wine.
That gives a place for those travelers to go, taste, and drive through our beautiful wine country. So I have one more question here. What % of Oregon wine is sold outside of Oregon? I always say the best for last, the toughies, right?
No, that's a great question, and I know we have the statistics on that, and so whatever number I tell you is going to be wrong, but it'll probably be close, because I can't remember the exact number. But I want to say that probably about half of the wine is sold in Oregon, and half outside of Oregon. We consume a lot of wine here, and we're very pro-local, which is great. And outside of Oregon, the biggest markets for Oregon wine are sort of, you know, the usual suspects of Texas and Illinois and Florida and New York. And then you have other places like, you know, Minnesota where it's really cold, so they like to drink a lot of wine as well. Export-wise, Canada, Japan, UK are usually the three biggest markets for Oregon wines.
And I think, Steve, we were chatting about the travelers that come to visit you at the Allison. It sounds like from what Allison Sokolblasser was saying that there's some real overlap in who comes to visit you from those markets that buy our wines.
It's the exact same list. It's very similar. So obviously we're seeing a lot of interest from the same markets. And again, I think that's why a lot of people are coming to the Allison is for those wines.
And we're lucky because we have direct flights to a lot of those markets, right? So Vancouver, BC is a huge market for Oregon. We have a direct flight to Japan, to Amsterdam, gives us access to all of Europe, and that's critical not only for our travelers, but for commodities and the Oregon economy in general.
So I think with that, we're probably going to wrap this up. Just want to say that for those of you who live in the northern Willamette Valley, we also encourage you to take a little trip, go downstate and see what else is happening down there, because there's some incredible things happening in the southern end of our valley with maybe not Pinot Noir, but they're growing a lot of fine wine down there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You've already done it, but please, before we officially close for the day, join me in offering our sincere thanks to Sokolblasser Winery and our speakers, Karen Hinsdale, Steve Hurst, Holly McPhee, and Allison Sokolblasser. We are adjourned. Thank you.